Hi, my name is Margaret Murray, and I am a board member for the Friends of the Jack Kerouac House in St. Petersburg, and you are watching Tampa Bay Community Networks.
I'm Linda Saul-Sena and welcome you to Culture Vultures. It's my pleasure today to introduce my guest, Margaret Murray. Margaret is one of the founders of the Friends of the Jack Kerouac House, and in the next 30 minutes you'll hear all about it. So Margaret, welcome.
Oh, thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Tell us about who is Jack Kerouac and why is his house important?
Well, Jack Kerouac is the grandfather of the Beats. He wrote his most famous novel, On the Road, which to this day is inspiring people to quit their day jobs and shuck everything and take off on big adventures all across the world. And he was very influential in the 1960s, and to this day, he remains a top-selling novelist. All of his books are in print, and as I said, he's just become this cultural icon and this real influence on people.
He was the inspiration for a million road trips.
Yes, yes.
What is his connection to the Tampa Bay area?
Well, Jack Kerouac lived here in St. Petersburg. He lived here twice in his life. He lived at 5155 10th Avenue North, moved away back up north in St. Petersburg, and then he moved into the house next door, and that's where he lived until his death in 1969. And he also has a lot of ties to the Tampa area. He was very good friends with Professor Jerry Wagner at USF Tampa, and this is when USF was a new school. And this Professor Jerry Wagner was this outlandish character. He owned a really infamous bar called the Wild Boar. And he just had these wild parties there, and it was this gathering place for all the intellectuals, all of the academics from USF, and Jack Kerouac was a good friend of his and would hang out there a lot. So he has ties to both Tampa and St. Petersburg.
I'm so sorry I missed that. I was kind of a kid at the time, but it sounds like a whole lot of fun. Yeah. And that was when the area by USF was sort of unpaved. I mean, it was really almost country.
Right, and that's the amazing thing, is just looking back at Kerouac's time here, you look at his life, but then it's also the snapshot of a completely different era in the Tampa Bay history.
So what is the physical house?
So the physical house, it is completely nondescript. It's a brick house, one story. It's on a corner lot. It was built by Nell and Tex Burrows. Tex was an architect, and he wanted to have this place where he and his wife would live out their lives. They had a young daughter at the time. And it's just like any other house you would see in Florida, except that it has this really famous history attached to it.
So what brought him to St. Petersburg?
His mom was in ill health throughout most of her life, and the winters up north were really difficult for her. He had a sister that he was very, very close to. Jack Kerouac came from a small family. It was just his mother, his sister, and himself. By the time he reached adulthood, he had a young brother who died when Jack Kerouac was a youngster, and his father passed away while Jack was in college. And Jack had always promised his father that he would take care of the family. So this little trio stuck together through everything, and Jack's sister moved here at one point to the Orlando area, so they became familiar with Florida, settled in St. Petersburg for about a year, moved back up north, and then came back here for the last 2 years of his life.
And he lived with his mother and his wife?
Yes, yes, and his wife was the sister of his childhood best friend. So again,
oh, that's pretty incestuous.
Yes. And again, it was just, Kerouac had this way of keeping people whom he valued, keeping them close to him. And he maintained friendships for years and years. Toward the end of his life, he was a bit more erratic and pushed a lot of people away as his drinking intensified. But he was a very devoted man to his family and his friends.
So he bought this house toward the end of his life, and he ended up living his last years here. And then what happened to the house?
So the house is a completely preserved time capsule.
Well, that's cool.
It's so amazing. You just don't ever find that. It would be like, I can't even imagine, like if there was a big celebrity and they just walked away from their home and never did anything to it. That's what this is like. There are actually dishes in the cupboard from when they lived there. Some of them are still wrapped in Lowell, Massachusetts newspapers from when they moved. There's a car in the garage. And one of
from like 1960?
Well, from 1971. Mm-hmm.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't realize this, but Jack Kerouac, who, like as you said, spawned a million road trips, never drove.
Oh, that's ironic.
Yes.
That's really funny.
Right. But there's been speculation that after he passed away, his wife and mother purchased that car because it was purchased right after his death.
So I personally can't imagine living with my spouse and mother. How did that work?
Not very well. They were, Stella, Kerouac's widow, was not nearly as worldly as some of the women that he had been married to before.
How many times was he married?
3 times.
Oh, okay.
Yes. And his mom was still primarily, I mean, he grew up in a French-speaking household. He was French-Canadian. So his mom still primarily spoke French. And I think I mentioned that she was in ill health and she was paralyzed for the last few years of his life. And Stella was really her caretaker. And add into that Jack Kerouac's drinking, so it was not a happy-go-lucky place.
Wow. So after his wife died, was his mother still around?
His mother passed away first. She passed away a few years after Jack died. And then Stella, his widow, continued to live in the house. And I think she lived there until maybe 1980. And then she moved back north, and then she passed away as well. And the house is now, it's part of Kerouac's estate, and the executor is Jack Kerouac's brother-in-law, Stella's brother.
But isn't there some controversy?
There is some controversy, as with everything related to Jack Kerouac. A judge in Pinellas County, who was also a character in his own right, he was Jim Morrison's roommate when Jim Morrison went to college here in Florida. And he was also the attorney presiding over the Terry Schiavo case.
Wow.
Yeah, so he has his own unique pedigree. In 2009, he ruled that the will that left everything to the Kerouacs or to his in-laws was a forgery, that someone had forged his mother's name on the will.
So how does that leave the estate?
Jack only has one living relative. That's a nephew, Paul Blake. There's really no one to contest the will. He's not really available. I think he has his own issues. So everything has kind of kept moving forward. John Sampas, the brother-in-law, has done an admirable job of administering the estate. He has overseen the publication or the republication of some of Jack Kerouac's novels. He's made sure that, some things are safeguarded, and, with an estate like this where, covering a few different states, things always kind of go awry a little bit, but he's donated a lot of papers to the bird collection at the New York Public Library.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. Not many people have the wherewithal or just instantly know what to do when you become the executor of a famous estate like that. But he's done a really good job at it.
The irony is that Jack Kerouac was such a free spirit and such a nonlinear person that suddenly there are all these sort of complicated legal entanglements that he wouldn't have been able to cope with probably very well.
He would have just hated all of this that's happening. Yeah.
Well, then it's probably good that he isn't here to worry about it.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So what are the future plans or dreams or visions for what this empty house in the middle of St. Petersburg could be?
Well, there has been so much interest in the house in the last few years. The Tampa Bay Times wrote a big story on it and showed people the interior of the house. And that kind of sparked some interest. So what we are doing at Friends of the Jack Kerouac House is right now we're working to preserve it and maintain it. We went in and did some small repairs. It's actually not that far from my house, so I go by periodically to make sure that the lawn is being mowed, and I keep in touch with the owner of the house next door. If there's anything awry, I kind of make sure that it's taken care of, and the other board members do that as well. But our plans are, we have 3 dream scenarios. And the first one is to open it as a museum. And there's some precedent here in Florida with the Hemingway House and Zora Neale Hurston,
right,
and Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings with Cross Creek. So I envision this grand trail of Florida authors' homes and the Kerouac House being a stop.
That's such an interesting idea.
I think it would be great.
People are increasingly able to travel for culture, and this would be a great cultural tourist destination.
Right.
And we know that cultural tourists spend a lot of money.
They do. It's one of the fastest growing areas of tourism, and it's not a fan of the Harry Potter books, but there are millions of people who make these pilgrimages to wherever Harry Potter's things are happening. And there are walking tours through England of famous authors, and people visit Shakespeare's home, and even, of course, closer to home, the Hemingway House.
Absolutely. Or the other 2 you mentioned.
Right.
So if this were, and weren't you involved in a literature festival in St. Petersburg called Sunlit?
Yes.
Describe that just a bit.
Oh, Sunlit was this wonderful, wonderful community-wide literary event. And this was the first year we did it. And we had events all over the city. We had poetry readings, we had workshops, we had literary, death match things, just all sorts of fun and creative events. And one of the highlights was that we had someone come out and act as a Kerouac impersonator.
You're kidding.
Oh, he was so wonderful.
Where do you find a Kerouac impersonator? Under K in the phone book?
Right.
Word of mouth? That is so much fun.
He is an actor who moved here from LA recently and just really got into the part. It was so amazing. I have photos of it, and I just think that he really brought so much life to this performance of his.
That would be a treat to see.
It was really amazing, yeah.
We're going to take a break, and then we'll hear about the other 2 ideas.
Okay, sounds good.
Change your life. Learn TV and internet video production skills at TBCN in Tampa. Become a skilled video producer quickly and inexpensively. Learn audio, editing, lighting, and camera basics. Produce multi-camera videos for TV, the internet, business, or pleasure.
Welcome to my live call-in show on Tampa Bay Community Network. You too can learn to produce and star in your own video programming, or you can have TBCN staff do it for you.
Call TBCN at 813-977-5200 today and change your life. Visit our website at tbcn.org and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn.
Welcome back to Culture Vultures. I'm Linda Saul-Sena, and I'm here today with Margaret Murray, who is one of the trustees for the Kerouac House, Friends of the Kerouac House. So Margaret, welcome back. We were talking about how this house might be used.
Yes, so the first way that I mentioned would be a museum. One of the other things that we are exploring is possibly partnering with the University of South Florida, St. Petersburg, and either moving it to their campus where it can be used as a center for research or literary studies, and then that would leave this whole beautiful lot vacant in the Kerouac, where the Kerouac house once was, and I think it would be beautiful to have some sort of urban memorial garden or monument to him. And he was a very spiritual man. He was raised in the Catholic religion, and that kind of was a through line throughout his life, his faith.
I had no idea.
Oh, yes, yes. Faith was very important to him.
Because he seemed like such a wild guy.
I mean, it's one of the weird contradictions with Jack Kerouac. And he was also a practicing Buddhist.
That's what I knew.
Yes.
So you could have quotes in the garden and
Right.
or things like that, or it could be a place to just retreat.
Right. And we do, there's so many people that still visit the house. If you do a Google image search for Jack Kerouac house, you see all these wonderful pictures of people standing in front of it. And we sometimes find little notes and letters in the mailbox. The people who live next door, in the house that he first lived in, I happened to stop by there the other day because I wanted to tell them that we have some things going on. And I said, well, you do know that Jack Kerouac lived in your house. And they had no idea.
You're kidding.
It was so wonderful.
I bet they were really excited.
They were. The woman, a couple and maybe one of their mothers lives there. And she just screamed, and she says, Jack Kerouac lived here? And I told her, I said, well, he lived in the house next door, and he lived there until he passed away. And suddenly a light bulb clicked, and they said, you know, people come up to the house all the time, and we just never know why. They peek in the window, and we just don't know why.
So, and the University of South Florida is open to exploring that idea?
They are. We've talked to a few different people, and those talks are continuing.
Well, they have the space, and that would be really a jewel in their crown.
I think so. It would be a really unique thing for them to have on their campus.
And lastly?
And lastly would be a Writers in Residence program that would be in the house. So we would hold events or do some sort of contest to have writers stay in the house and hopefully be inspired. There's one in Orlando. After On the Road was published, he moved to Orlando and wrote there. He wrote Dharma Bums there, which was his next novel. And there's a Writers in Residence program there already.
So how does that work? Does somebody physically move to the house, a writer?
Yes.
For a set period of time?
Yes, I think the one in Orlando is 6 to 8 weeks.
So they get away and they have quiet and they can focus on their own work.
Right, and soak up some of the history of the home. And I think it's a wonderful, wonderful program. The one in Orlando near Winter Park is just amazing, but there's some differences in the homes. If we were to do that with this house, it would mean completely gutting everything that's already there. And making sure that it's brought up to date and renovating it. And there's so much character in that house. So that's probably the least favorite of mine.
Well, they're all really exciting possibilities. So how do we get from this idea that this is an abandoned but important structure to making something happen?
Well, we do fundraisers all the time, and the Friends of the Jack Kerouac House Board, we hold a lot of outreach events throughout the year. His birthday was in March 12th, so we have a big concert at the Flamingo, which is one of the bars that he hung out in.
I actually attended that,
Oh.
and I didn't realize you could still smoke in bars in Florida. Oh my goodness. Somebody said that is a dive bar. It is a dive bar.
It is. I think it's required that you smoke when you go to the Flamingo.
I walked through. It took me about 3 minutes, and afterwards I thought, God, I need my clothes fumigated.
It's so true.
I'm not the hippie I used to be.
Yes. So we do. We have a concert there in March, and then he passed away in October. So we have another celebration there in October as well. We talked about the Sunlit Literary Festival with the Kerouac impersonator. And then 2 years ago, I hosted a citywide on-the-road book club where
Oh, is that cool?
it was so much fun.
Where did you do it?
We did it all over St. Petersburg. I think we had 4 or 5 different venues, and we'd meet one evening a week, and then we'd alternate, and then we'd meet a Saturday morning, and whoever wanted to come would, and we would just discuss topics and on the road. It was so wonderful.
That's such a cool and innovative idea.
It was really wonderful. And the other event that we do, we did one last year. It's called Kerouac in Paradise, and it's a literary bike tour of Kerouac's life.
What is a literary bike tour?
It's not as stuffy as it would seem. Last year we started at the Flamingo, and the owner of the Flamingo, who knew Kerouac, he welcomed everyone. We had 125 people.
Wow.
It sold out, and I did a lot of
BYO
research.
bicycle?
Yes. And we just go to different stops all around St. Petersburg where he lived, where he played.
That's kind of like a pilgrimage. It's really cool.
It was fun. It was so much fun, and people just love it. There's so many people that really appreciate the history of St. Petersburg, and you know, there's a lot that we talk about, the tourism and the development of downtown and the pier and things like that, but this is like this little hidden gem, a part of our history that not many people know about. So it's really nice to be able to look at places that Jack Kerouac lived, but then I also talked about what buildings and businesses were around in the 1960s that wouldn't be here now.
Because there's been so much change.
Yes, there's this one stretch of Central Avenue between the 2200 and the 2500 block, which right now there's just a new restaurant opening every day, and there are clothing boutiques, and you can buy handmade soaps, and it's just this really wonderful stretch of Central Avenue. But in the 60s, there was an International Harvester tractor lot there. And there was even McCall's Artificial Limbs store.
Less glam.
Yes, but it was the post-war era, so there was a need for that. So it's nice to look at how St. Petersburg has changed and kind of let people know what was there.
So if folks wanted to help, you all have a website?
Yes, we do. It's kerouachouse.com.
I love that.
Yes.
And so it sounds as if you have activities really throughout the year.
Yes, we try to plan something new and unique, at least apart from the 2 standing celebrations. We try to have something really unique every year, and then people always approach us.
Didn't Jack Kerouac hang out at Haslam's bookstore? Didn't I hear that?
Yes, yes. A lot of people say that it's haunted by Jack Kerouac.
Ooh.
Yes, there are rumors that if you work there late at night, books will fall off the shelves, and it's always right around the K's.
I love that. That's great.
But it is, I mean, a few people have talked to the owner. The owner's name was Charles at the time. That Kerouac would come in, and Ken Casey had just come out. When Kerouac was living here, Ken Casey had just come out with One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which was a huge blockbuster hit.
Absolutely.
And it got prominent placement in a bookstore, and Kerouac would take those copies of
a fellow K.
Yes, and he would hide them because it was right next to his name. So he would put his books facing out, and he would hide One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
That is really funny.
Yes. So that's something that aspiring authors should know.
And Haslam's is still there.
It is
Thank
still
heavens.
there.
As things move forward, people can go to your website and sort of keep abreast of what's being planned.
Yes, we have an email sign up, and I send out emails to let people know of any new updates. And we also have a Facebook page, Friends of the Jack Kerouac House, and I post on there quite a bit, and even just things that are happening in other parts of the world related to Jack Kerouac. last year.
Isn't there a film being made about him?
There is. A local filmmaker, Christy Anderson, is filming a documentary about Jack Kerouac.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, and she just got back from a research trip to Asheville, North Carolina. I think there were 4 or 5 people who knew Jack Kerouac here in St. Petersburg who've all kind of migrated to North Carolina. So she just finished interviewing a lot of those folks.
I love the local tie. I think that's, I really never heard about this until recently, until you told me about it. And I thought, that is exciting and novel. And I think that as time goes on, the reputation of the beat poets sort of, I think of it comparably with, you know, mid-century modern architecture. It's like these things are being rediscovered as part of Florida's legacy and celebrated.
Yes, and that is, I think that there's this perfect confluence right now with the greater understanding of how the beat poets and authors really influenced today's literature. You know, at the time, it was very easy to dismiss that writing, especially Kerouac's On the Road. You know, more and more people concentrated on the fact that he wrote it, you know, in a spurt of inspiration, and he taped pieces of paper together and it was on a scroll, and were more concerned with the sensational aspects of it than they were about the actual writing. But the writing has stood the test of time, just as Allen Ginsberg's Howl has. People are really coming to appreciate the importance of this writing. And also St. Petersburg as a city has grown to embrace the arts. So it's the perfect time for the two to come together and stand.
I love that.
Yes.
That's marvelous. I know when you pulled a group of people together to think about what the future of the house might be, I was lucky enough to be there, and what I heard around the table was people saying yes. You know, representing all these institutions from the city to, you know, arts organizations, to the university, to just interested individuals in the community, to critics, and everybody's saying, yeah, how do we make this happen? How do we collaborate?
And that is one of the most amazing things about being involved, is that everyone is so excited and just wants to know how they can help. And we have people doing all sorts of things. I met, through the Dali Museum, I met a lawyer who said, you know what, I'm just going to look into this. So he sent me a timeline of all the legal activity, half of which I cannot understand. But it's so helpful to see who was involved at different points in the house's history. It's just so many people have come forward. Christy Anderson, the filmmaker,
Right.
she just interviewed a friend of the family's, and the piano that was in Jack Kerouac's living room is sitting in this woman's basement, which to me is just so amazing. I mean, that's not, I've heard of people that, you know, have a signed copy of his book, his accountant.
Really?
Yes. A friend of mine on Facebook said, hey, did you know that my dad was Jack Kerouac's accountant? And I thought, well, that's interesting. So Kerouac signed a copy of his book for him. So there are all these people. He was a very giving and generous man, and just made sure that people, anyone who helped him or anyone he met, he made sure that they had a memento of him in some way. And so a signed book is amazing, but to carry around a piano?
That's really extraordinary. Well, Margaret, I have to say, you are a very generous-spirited person to put all this energy into trying to make this legacy happen for the community.
Thank
and
you.
It's really kind of new information to me, and probably to a lot of folks watching this show, but I'm so interested in seeing how it all evolves. And I'm going to try to come to the performances and, learn more,
wonderful.
and dust off my old college copy of Off the Road.
Well, it takes a village. There's so many people helping us, and it's really exciting to see.
Thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, thank you.
And thank you all for watching Culture Vultures.